Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Steve. I'm a principal engineer in big tech, open source enthusiast, and this is Linux, by the way. Today, we're going to look at installing Arch Linux. I've been running Fedora 41 lately, and it's been great, but it's also been quite a while since I ran Arch Linux, and it also has a DaVinci Resolve package I want to test out to see if I can make these videos under Linux. The first thing we need to do is make a USB key. I'm using the Samsung 128 gig USB key, and I have quite a few of these laying around. In the past, I used a really cheap one, and I had weird errors and stuff, so the Samsung 128 gigs, those always seem to work for me. So let's go ahead and go to Downloads, and we're going to see that the current release is 2024.12.01, and we'll just download this. I don't normally use the torrent ones. I just do the direct downloads, and I'll find a mirror that seems close to here. So let's go down to United States. Let's go all the way to the bottom and sort of pick a random one until it looks like it's going to download fast. That's San Francisco, should be fine. And we're going to download 1.1 gigs. So I'm going to go ahead and download this, and then I'll meet you at the end of it. So we're done downloading, and the next thing we're going to do is pop open a terminal, and I've inserted the USB key, and I'm going to do a sudo fdisk-l, and this will show me all of the different drives I have on the system. And so in this case, you can see my Western Digital black. That's part of my framework's internal drive. So I'm going to install there, but that's not where I want the USB image. This Lux image is mounted as an overlay file system on top of that. And this is compressed RAM. And this dev SDA is actually the Samsung drive. So 119.51 GIB, and that matches my expectations. And then I did install Windows using that same key. And so you can see here that it has the Microsoft file system on it. So that is safe to overwrite. If you're doing this at home, stop and triple check that it's the right drive. So if you overwrite your other drives, you could lose your data. Always check this out and make sure that you're doing the right one. And if you're uncomfortable, just stop and don't do it, and find a way to actually figure out like what's in your system and make sure you don't write it on the wrong one. Okay, so our download was successful, and now we just want to check and make sure that the ISO is good and intact and doesn't have any corruption or anything. It's not normal too, but it's also pretty quick and easy to check. So if you click the SHA-256 sums, you'll see here there's some checksums for each of the file names. And so we'll switch to the terminal, and then I'll run the SHA-256 sum on the Arch Linux ISO I just downloaded, and that will be a pretty quick operation. And so you see here that this looks like it matches this. If you want to check it out quick and easy, the best way is to run the SHA sum and then grep for the pasted value, and that will check them against each other, and you see, boom, we have a match. All good. So let's go ahead and run a sudo fdisk-l one more time, and we'll see here it's dev SDA, and that's just a triple check, confirm you're doing the right thing, etc. And so now what we'll do is we'll do a sudo dd, and if is going to be the in file, and we're going to say that is the Arch Linux ISO, and of is going to be dev SDA, and then I'm going to do a block size of 1 megabyte. And so we'll do that. And by the way, well, that went super fast. So we're going to also run sync there. If you're looking at this and you're on a MacBook, you can generally run the same commands, except you use the disk-util command, but the dd command takes different units. So one capital M won't work there. You'll have to use one lowercase m. And it's really actually not critical. It's just a little bit faster if you pass a big block size, so it can just sequentially flush out a bunch of bytes. If yours finishes fast like mine did, go ahead and run the sync command, and that's going to tell the operating system to flush all of its buffers. So if we were to shut down at the exact moment we ran the dd command without running the sync command, there would only be a partial write to the USB. I mean, even potentially no writes. So we don't know where it's at in the process of writing to that. And so by running sync, we're saying, if you have IO to write, get it all done and then return. And so with that done, we're going to go ahead and reboot and boot off of the USB key. So we're rebooted and we're on the live ISO. And the first thing we need to do is set up our internet connection. So if you type IP link, what you can see here is that we only have two interfaces. And one is the local host, which isn't going to get us anywhere. And the other one is WLAN 0, and that is set to down. And so if you see the big red letters there, down. If you're plugged into Ethernet, you probably don't need to do this step. But if you're using the Wi-Fi, what we want to use is use IWCTL. And you can type help here to see a bunch of commands. And we are going to do a station WLAN 0 get networks, and that's going to show the networks available to us. And so you see I have all these different Wi-Fi endpoints here, and then we're just going to do a station, WLAN 0, connect, Dragonfly, and it's going to ask me for a passphrase. And from there, it's going to connect. So we can exit out of here. And if you type IP link again, what you're going to see is that's set to up. And so you can also confirm that you're connected to the internet by running ping to Google DNS servers. And so you can see there, I'm pinging Google DNS and everything looks good. I have an older video, which is installing Arch Linux, which still holds up. And it is step by step on what to configure. Today, we're going to use Arch install, which is basically the installation guide scripted with some sensible defaults. So go ahead and run Arch install here. And then we're just going to kind of go option by option. And it's going to require internet. So if it doesn't boot up, check internet again, make sure it's good. In this case, we are good. We're going to use the English language. For the locales, we're going to use US, ENUS, and UTF-8. That all makes sense. Select a mirror that's close to you. And so we'll say that we want to go to the United States and go back. For disk configuration, go to partitioning and use best effort. And from here, you can select the actual permanent hard drive. So you see here, I have the USB key. I don't want to install there. I want to install it to the laptop. And we'll say yes to that. And you have your choice of file systems here. XFS is really good and reliable. BTRFS is newer. It's also pretty reliable. And ext4 is like everywhere. So we're going to choose ext4 and we're going to say create a separate home partition. And you can see here we have 1 GB for /boot. We have 50 GB for the root directory. And then we have 880 GB for my home directory. This partitioning scheme usually works. The only thing I've seen is that sometimes if you're installing commercial programs and they're installing in /opt, then /opt can use a lot of space out of that root partition. So if you're going to do that, keep that in mind. In my case, I'm going to put everything in my home directory, so that's fine. So we'll go back from there and we'll say disk encryption and always encrypt it because you may want to trade in your laptop or sell it or something. And so it's really hard to wipe drives, and encryption sort of just by default makes a lot of sense. So we're going to say encryption type Lux, that's fine. Encryption password, we'll use something super secret. Hopefully you're using something longer than Linux, by the way, not making a YouTube video about it. And from there, we'll hit back. And then we can ignore swap, bootloader's fine, unified kernel, which is fine. The host name is the unique network identifier for your system. So in this case, I only have one framework laptop, so I'm just going to call this the framework 13. And you just want to pick something that isn't already used on your network. If you do pick something that's used, it's not a big deal. You can change it later, but it's always more convenient to just pick something that's unique to your system. And let's go ahead and set the root password. This can be the same as your other encryption password, but you'll use the root password more. So you're only going to unlock the disk at boot time, but you'll be using the root password potentially a lot more as you configure your system while it's running. We're going to add a user account here, and I'm just going to use the typical my name and password. And this is where most of the action happens. It's what your desktop will run as and everything else. And we will give sudo permissions, and we'll say confirm and exit. And then for profile, this is probably one of the most useful things. So we select profile, type, desktop, and then from here you can pick your environment. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Gnome, but if you wanted to install i3 or Hyperland or KDE or anything, you could do that. And you can see this comes with Gnome and Gnome tweaks. And so we'll say that is good. And then also we have our graphics driver setups. So if you're running NVIDIA or something, you want to pick that, or in a VM, you can pick those options. In this case, I'm running the Framework 13 AMD edition. And so I'm going to say use the AMD graphics stack. And for Greeter, we have GDM, which makes sense because we picked Gnome. That looks good. For audio, let's go ahead and pick Pipewire. And Pipewire is just a newer, more well-architected audio system that ideally will fix a lot of issues across the Linux audio ecosystem. So we'll pick that, especially for a new install. For kernels, just use the default one, that's fine. For the network configuration, we're going to say use Network Manager. And for additional packages, we should have everything we need. For optional repositories, we could say multilib. If you're planning on running like Steam or something and you have 32-bit libraries, that comes in handy. So we can say, we'll say yes to that. For time zone, just pick the one closest to you. I'm going to pick mountain, and it's going to automatic sync. That's fine. And then we can click install. And we're going to say, yes, we'd like to continue. And this is going to start installing. What you can see here as we execute this script is it's running all of the same commands basically that we would run by hand. It just scripts them all and automates it. And so it's still very transparent, and you can change any of these options. Nothing's forever. If you do have to change your disk partitions again, we didn't use LVM, so that makes it a little tougher to work with those, but not a big deal. We have a pretty flexible layout by default. However, if you use Arch install and you pick LVM, it doesn't support the encrypted boot option. So that's why I chose the standard install. Also, if you pay close attention, you can see it enables things like FS trim. So if you have an SSD, it's going to periodically discard the old blocks and keep your drive healthy. And steps like that are really easy to miss when you're going through the install by hand. So I like all the defaults here, and that it's sort of doing the sensible thing to keep your system happy. And there we go. The installation is finished, and it does let us go in the chroot if we need to install other packages and everything. In this case, we select everything sort of like out of the box. And so let's do a sudo reboot. And then hopefully we'll be rebooted into our Gnome environment. So I've rebooted and we're in Gnome, and everything looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and run the terminal, which is Gnome terminal at this point. And we can do an IP link. And from here, we can see that the Wi-Fi is down. So we will wanna set that up again. So let's go to Wi-Fi. And if you pick Network Manager, the install, this should just be basically the same thing. And this is gonna connect. There we go. And we'll just do an IP link again. And now we're up and connected, and I should be able to ping that. There we go. Cool. Now we're booted into Gnome, and we have a basic Arch Linux system with none of like the desktop tweaks. And so the first thing we'd probably want to do is install a browser. And when we do this, it's going to ask us which sort of fonts we want. So what I like to do here is, instead of picking or choosing one, is I like to install the Noto fonts, the TTF, Bitstream, Vera. We also want the TTF Deja Vu, TTF Droid, TTF Input Nerd, and TTF Liberation. Those are all pretty good fonts. And so we'll just install those. And by default, it's not going to have every possible font under the sun. And also, Arch has a lot more fonts available too. And so now we can install Firefox. And we'll say, yes, go ahead and install that. And it should only take a second. Yep. And there we go. So now we can go ahead and run Firefox. And you see everything appears right there. And we'll just say pin to the dash and move this over. And we'll unpin that one. Now that we have a web browser, usually my next step is to install an AUR wrapper. And so in this case, I like Paru. If we click here, it's going to give us a Git repo. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to run a sudo pacman-s -needed and do a base devel and git and install that. And so this will allow us to clone the repo. So there's the git command. And what we can do is we can download this, and we'll just kind of highlight this and then type git clone and middle click and just do it to the current directory. There we go. And we can cd to paru. And now we can type make package -si. And this will compile the Paru AUR manager / Pacman wrapper. And we'll just type our password in here. And we do want Rust. And we'll say yes. And so this is going to download Rust, and it's going to compile it all. And if you want to know what it's doing, anytime you see the AUR.archlinux.org, you can go to view package build. And this is a great way to learn about Linux and how packaging works and everything. So it's going to specify, here are all the dependencies and the steps needed to build a package. And so it's really easy to read. And you can see here there's not too much complex about it. So in this case, it's going to run a cargo fetch, and it's going to make sure that there's Rust there, and it's going to run a cargo build, and then it's going to install some files. And if you've ever wondered, like, where are the files going, etc., well, this is exactly how they get there. So it's going to have some ZSH completions and bash and stuff like that, and a default man page and configuration file. And so as we're going through the build here, we see this is all just normal Rust output, so nothing too special here. While it's building, if you want to check out what's going on, just make a new terminal and type htop. And you can see here that we have the CPU pegged at 100%, compiling, and it's got the Rust 2021 edition. And so that should take a few minutes to go through before it finishes. But that's how I always check. So the Rust binary built, and now it's going to finish packaging it, and we're going to install it. And there we go. So now we should be able to run paru, and there it goes. So we can do -- help here, and we can now search for things. So we'll say search for nerd, because I want to see what nerd fonts are available. And so you can see there's all sorts of different fonts now that pop up, and this is actually searching the AUR, and that's what we want. So by default, if you just use the Pacman utility, it's going to search only the official repositories, but a lot of the fonts and stuff we want are under this AUR. And also, this is how you install software like DaVinci Resolve. So if you went and said paru-ss DaVinci, then it's going to actually show some matches here. So we have DaVinci Resolve. If we want to check out what's going on with this out-of-date package, what we can do is we can go back to the repository and we can search for DaVinci Resolve here. And that's going to have a red highlight, meaning something's going on. And we can click in there. And what we'll see is there's going to be a discussion. And so the latest comment was just a few days ago. And there is a diff here. And this diff allows us to run the newest version. So DaVinci Resolve itself is a big zip file, and what really matters is the SHA-SUM and downloading it. And so we can actually take these changes and test them out locally. So what we can do here is we can go to the package, just highlight this, and just like we did for PackR, we can do a git clone, do that, and download it locally, and cd DaVinci Resolve. And if you see here that there's only going to be two files, which is the package build and the install file. I actually don't have Vim yet, so let's go ahead and do that. Pacman-sy neovim, we'll do that. That's done, there we go. So we'll do nvim package build. And so you can see here is our package build. And on this side, we have this is just a comment. It's not even like an artifact or anything. And so what we have here is the release version is now 1 and 2. So the minor release version is 1 and the release version is 2. And then what we can do is we can steal these changes. And so we have the SHA-SUMs here. And so this is, instead of EB, etc., it's this. So let's go ahead and delete this. And if you're wondering how I delete inside quotes, when there's that big long checksum, all I do is I go here and I just do DW for delete word. That works out really well. And so we'll go ahead and paste in the new SHA-SUM. There we go. And in the bottom for 5.3, that one was also changed. So we'll go back here and we'll say delete the word, and we'll copy this other checksum. There we go. And from here, we'll just paste that in. And so we also have a referrer ID, and this is just some of the code that's required to actually script the downloading. So Blackmagic has like a landing page, and you have to enter your name and the reason you're downloading, etc. And so these are all working around that. So we'll replace that one, and it looks like the other one didn't change. And we changed the SHA-SUM. And then down here, we also added a libc++ ABI. And so what we can do is we can take that and we will find that line in here, which is TBB. There we go. And we will just add that in here. So libc++ ABI, like that. And this random person on the internet says it works. And so, gosh darn it, I believe them. Now to make the package, we're going to do exactly like we do with paru. So we'll just do a make package-si, and that's going to go ahead and download it and then install it. So in this case, I say download it because we're doing some packaging, but it's basically just downloading a zip file and then installing those pieces of the zip file in different places in the system to be compatible and to work with our current system. You can see here that even though the one in the user repository is out of date, with just a few simple tweaks and editing it ourselves, now we have 19.1.2, which is the current newest version. And that's sort of the magic or the spirit of Linux, is that if you have the will and the knowledge, or at least the ability to Google, you can fix packages and you can update your system without waiting on anybody to approve it or to have a soft distribution thing like vet it and all that. You can just make the change and boom, you have the new version. And that is often the case with bugs. With bugs, one of the key metrics is the mean time to resolution. So you want to resolve a bug as fast as possible. And that's kind of where Linux shines, is that you can update all of these things on Arch instantaneously without the support of the maintainers or anything else, because the packaging and everything we're using is all open source and just a few simple commands and we're good to go. So we've downloaded DaVinci Zip, and you can see here that the squash rootfs is a virtual file system, and these are the files that are going to be in it. And then we are going to go ahead and put those in a package. And in a second here, we'll ask us for our password, and it will install it for us automatically. You can see how valuable this is to learn how packaging works and learn how the system works. You'd be hard pressed on a Windows or a Mac OS systems a lot of times to figure out, like, where did the files go and what are their permissions and everything else. Whereas with Arch Linux, we can just, it's all just a script. We can just edit, we can see it all, and it's right there in front of us. And we can tinker with it just like we just did to make it all work. So let's go ahead and install this, and we'll say yes. And you can see it's 6 gigabytes, and it's going to extract all the files we downloaded. And there we go. And so now if we go ahead and run pacman-q DaVinci Resolve, we'll see that it shows up there, and we can do a QL, and this is going to show us all of the files that are in the package. And so in this case, like I was talking about during the partitioning, Resolve installs itself to /opt. So if your root partition was like really small, you couldn't fit these programs. In this case, 50 gigabytes is more than enough to fit Resolve and the other programs and not be a big deal. And all my media will be in the home directory. So let's go ahead and run opt resolve bin resolve. There it is. And we'll wait for the screen to pop up. And there it is. So it's starting up. We got the splash screen. And we are looking pretty good here. So we have untitled project, which is just sort of like the default project. Now that it's running, the first thing I like to do, I'm on a 4K display. And just to match the rest of the system, we can go to preferences and we can click user up here. And we can change the UI display scale and make that maybe 150. We'll do fractional scaling. There we go. And so we'll quit out of that. And then the next time we boot it up, it's going to probably boot way faster. Yeah, there we go. And now everything's scaled up 150%. So sometimes it's good, with the window decorations and Gnome and all that, you might want that a little smaller. And so there we have it. That's sort of the magic of Linux. In the beginning of the video, I had Fedora 41. I created a USB key, I rebooted, I used Arch install to format the whole thing and put Arch Linux on. We then rebooted again into our new Gnome environment, installed the web browser, found a bug in the DaVinci package, fixed the bug, installed it, and all of that happened roughly in the span of 20 minutes. So there was a little bit of time for downloading and things like that, but all in all, it was super fast. And we're using the AMD ROCm drivers, so we have some sort of reasonable acceleration there by default. And we know where the files are installed and how our system works. So if we have to go change that again or fix something, it's all right there at our fingertips. So that's the basic, how do I install Arch on Linux, all the way from nothing to video editor in like 20 minutes. And now I need your help. I'm trying to switch my editing workflow to DaVinci Resolve. What other tools should I look at to make YouTube videos on Linux? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.